Hello and welcome to this movie night review of the 2008 film that is The Boy in Striped Pyjamas. I'll start by giving a spoiler-ridden explanation of the film before going on to look at the positives, the negatives, and one talking point of this film. So, this film is based around a family from Nazi Germany, the father of which is an officer in the SS or army, and he is, working with the concentration camp, and essentially they lived very near to the concentration camp, and Bruno, the son, really enjoys exploring, and he ends up going and finding this concentration camp, making friends with a boy called Shmuel, who's in the concentration camp. They talk along the fence. You may have seen some pictures to do with this film. And eventually, Bruno decides to go into the concentration camp, and when he goes in, everybody's rounded up and put in a gas chamber, including Bruno and Shmuel. So, I'll start with looking at the positives. I only actually have one really, which is that the ending is powerful. It's a very sort of upsetting ending, the chaos. I think the bit where you see the guy with the gas mask who puts the gases in, it's quite upsetting, and all the chaos around it and all that. I think that is quite a powerful part of this film. But I'll go on to, and so that I think that is something that does help us in terms of understanding some of the Holocaust and just how awful it is. But I'll go on to look at the issues now. So just with the film, one thing that really got on my nerves was the fact that they all speak English in like Southern England accents. It's based in, and I know that it is made for, I think, British film companies, but it's based in obviously Germany and Poland, and it just makes it quite difficult for me to sort of get any involvement, as in obviously language is a big part of culture, and so when everyone is just speaking as if they're from like Kent, yeah, that I find that really frustrating personally. I think that when a language is set in a certain place, even if I don't understand that language, I'd rather just watch them speak the like different languages with subtitles or whatever. It is something I have with films. Like, yeah, it just doesn't make sense for me. I mean, if it was something that's supposed to be based in a desert, you wouldn't film it in Stockport, would you? So if it's supposed to be speaking German and Polish, why are they speaking English? Just doesn't make sense. Next, a few plot holes with this film. So firstly, the guy's 8 and he's grown up in Nazi Germany, and he doesn't seem in any way brainwashed. Like, he's kind of, I guess, a modern day child in some ways, in that he has no prejudices. He's completely oblivious to basically everything that's going on, even though we know that as even his sister is, but apparently not him, even though he's younger and, supposedly more, I guess, easy to influence, or impressionable. He just doesn't seem to have it in any way at all. It just doesn't make much sense, really. And something relating to this is the fact that but he asks his parents, "Oh, why are these people in the farm in their pajamas?" It's so easy for them to just sort of lie or make something up, or basically just get any easy way out of this question. Obviously, parents lie to their kids a lot, in good and bad ways, and they will believe it because they trust their parents. But they just seem to ignore it. That's also just quite frustrating. Like, there's quite a few things that are quite frustrating where it's just right in your face that just how unrealistic it is. And so yeah, that's also quite annoying that they don't just say something. And just one other thing that's also a bit unrealistic is the fact that they say that the concentration camp is miles away. Yeah, apparently an 8-year-old boy, uncontrolled, manages to just run miles and miles there and back, which again is strange. So yeah, there's quite a lot of issues, like just in the making and the story of the film alone. But I'll go on to look at just two huge issues with the historical aspect that completely undermine this film, and really the film undermines, I think, in some ways, just sort of the magnitude of obviously what happened with the concentration camps and in the Holocaust. So the two things is, firstly, obviously there's Pavel, who is in the house, someone who's prisoner, I think from concentration camp as well. He's in the same outfits at some point, and they're just, it's almost as if he's like a servant, and the family are just, they're a bit harsh, but I mean, okay, they have one bit where he gets hit, but as in other than that, the mother's sort of very grateful and kind at some point when he helps with Bruno and all these things. And obviously, people should fail to forget. I think in this film it fails to acknowledge that people were dying of terrible diseases. They were starving. And all these terrible atrocities that happened, and basically all they portray, is what happens to Pavel is he's just a servant who has a family that are just sort of dicks to him. Like it's just completely undermining what happened, and really fails to get into that properly. And something else that I'd like to point out is just the ending is, or the fact that, because obviously he spends time with Shmuel, he talks to Shmuel, supposedly about lots of different things because they just sit there and chat. That's all they do, and at no point, even though they're friends, does Shmuel say anything. So as in the way in which, for example, Shmuel's always quite hungry and he's like, "Oh, bring you a big sandwich," like they just act as if. The film just acts as if Shmuel is, like a growing teenage boy who's just always, he's always got an appetite, he's always hungry. Well, no, he was starving because he had very, very little food. And similarly, they're talking, and obviously, in any circumstance, if you're talking to someone who's living in a concentration camp, and, obviously one of the first things you talk about in their life would be, how awful it is, how terrible the conditions are, and just everything about it. But there's still Bruno is still so ignorant to all this that he tries to go in, as in, if it was in any way realistic, it would have been within the first few minutes that Bruno would have realised how awful the concentration camps were, and he'd have never even dreamt of going into them. But apparently, even though they supposedly spend hours together, Shmuel never mentions how awful it is, and Bruno is somehow completely oblivious. It just doesn't make sense how you could talk that much and just such obvious things about someone's life could not come up. It just doesn't make any sense at all. So there are all the negatives, and there really were quite a few. I'll go on to look at the mixed issue for me, or the sort of talking point. And this is about how the focus is around Bruno in the ending, and obviously all sort of grieving is towards him. So I think I've seen like some people's opinion on this that essentially this is just making the German look the victim and all this, and it doesn't truly appreciate obviously how many prisoners in the concentration camp there were that were gassed. And then like another interpretation, I've sort of thought about this is, was it just showing that, was it making people realise just how awful what they have been doing, was it sort of, is it like an irony in that after all they do, they realise just how much hardship and upset it brings. I think that ultimately my conclusion on this is that because of the fact that we already know how terrible the Holocaust was, and this is made obviously well over 60 years after it, and it had finished, and we know just how awful the atrocities were. I don't think that you really needed to explain how bad the thing, how bad what they were doing was, and so it doesn't really have that much power in sort of showing just the fact that it was awful. I think that ultimately the focus is taken away from the prisoners in the concentration camp, and including, of course, Shmuel. Like, it's all based around Bruno. I mean, Shmuel is a main character as well, but essentially I think that to a certain extent this is in there just for drama more than anything. It's just there so that a main character dies, and how that affects everyone. I think it does fail to accept and fail to acknowledge and show in a powerful way to the viewer the impact it had on the millions of people that died in concentration camps. So yeah, I'd probably go against the film on that aspect as well. So overall, this is a pretty poorly made film. It's really quite inaccurate in many ways. It doesn't really have that much of a purpose. Yeah, in my opinion, it's a very, very poor film. I'd give it a 2 out of 10, and that's being generous. So, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this review, and I'll see you next time.